I used to believe my life was stable. Secure. I had a wife, a daughter, a home. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't struggling either. My wife, Emily, and I had been together for 10 years, married for 7. Our daughter, Lily, was the center of my universe. I worked hard so that she could have a better future. And until that night, I thought Emily shared the same dream. It was a Friday. I had been working late, trying to finish a project so I could have the weekend free to spend with my girls. I remember checking my phone before I left the office, seeing no missed calls or texts from Emily. That was unusual. She always messaged to ask when I'd be home. Driving through our neighborhood, I noticed how still everything was. The houses stood in perfect suburban harmony, warm lights glowing behind curtains, families finishing their dinners, watching TV, or putting their kids to bed. That was supposed to be my night, too. But as I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something strange. The porch light was off. Emily always left it on for me. A small thing, but it felt wrong. I stepped out of my car and walked toward the door, my heart suddenly uneasy. I reached for the knob, and found it unlocked. A voice inside told me to turn around. To leave. But I pushed open the door instead. That's when I saw them. Emily was standing in the middle of the living room, her arms crossed, her expression cold, unreadable. And sitting on my couch, legs spread, like he owned the place, was a man I had never seen before. Tall. Smug. His eyes met mine with a lazy confidence that made my blood boil. Emily's voice was calm. Too calm. You need to leave. I blinked, as if I had misheard her. What? I said, you need to leave. This is his house now. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I turned to the man, my fists clenching at my sides. He didn't move. Didn't flinch. He only smirked and leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. She's mine now, he said, his voice dripping with amusement. And when Lily grows up, I'll take care of her too. The room went silent. My vision blurred with a red haze. My body moved before my mind could catch up. Emily didn't scream. She didn't step between us. She just watched. And that was the moment I knew, she had planned this. To be continued. I remember checking my phone before heading home, no messages from Emily. That was odd. Usually, she'd text something, need anything from the store. Or Lily's being a little rascal tonight. But there was nothing. Just silence. The drive home felt longer than usual. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But something in my gut felt off, like an itch I couldn't scratch. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for the living room window, where a faint light glowed behind the curtains. I smiled to myself. Maybe Emily fell asleep watching TV again. It wouldn't be the first time. I grabbed my briefcase and quietly unlocked the front door, careful not to wake Lily if she was already asleep. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. There was laughter. A man's laughter. Low. Confident. Arrogant. And then, Emily's voice, light and playful, softer than how she ever spoke to me anymore. I froze. The words weren't clear at first, just muffled sounds, but as I stepped closer, the voices sharpened. I don't know why I ever wasted my time with him, Emily said, her tone dripping with contempt. The man chuckled. You've got me now. He's nothing. A sickening chill crawled up my spine. I took another step forward, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. My feet felt like they were moving through wet cement. I turned the corner. Emily was curled up on the couch, her legs draped over a man's lap. He was tall, muscular, and confident in a way that made my stomach turn. His arm was slung casually around her waist, his hand resting possessively on her hip. And then Emily saw me. For a split second, her face flickered with something, shock, guilt, hesitation, but it was gone before I could hold on to it. Instead, her lips twisted into something cold. "You're home," she said flatly, as if I were an unexpected guest, not her husband. The man turned his head lazily, sizing me up with a smirk. "Guess the little husband finally made it." He stretched his arm, acting like he belonged here. Like I was the intruder in my own home. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My mouth felt dry, my mind numb. Then Emily stood, walked toward me, and with the same casual cruelty she just used to laugh about me, she said the words that shattered everything I thought I knew. "I don't want you here anymore." Her words hit me like a freight train. I stood there, rooted in place, as my own wife, the mother of my child, looked at me as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience. "What?" My voice barely sounded like my own. Emily folded her arms, shifting her weight onto one leg like she was bored of this conversation already. I said, "I don't want you here anymore." Her tone was calm, almost rehearsed. My eyes flicked to the man on the couch. He was watching me, his lips curled into a smug grin. He wasn't just comfortable, he was settled in, like he belonged here. Like he had already taken my place. He leaned back, stretching his arms over the back of the couch. "Didn't you hear her, buddy? She's done with you." His voice was slow and condescending, like he was enjoying this. I clenched my fists, my whole body trembling. I had imagined a million worst-case scenarios in my life, losing my job, getting sick, a car accident, but this? My own wife betraying me so openly. Kicking me out of my own home, in front of another man. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. "Emily, think about what you're saying. What about Lily?" For a second, she hesitated. But then she shook her head. "I'll explain it to her." Explain it to her? Like this was some minor inconvenience, like she wasn't about to rip our daughter's family apart. I took a slow step forward, lowering my voice. "Emily, please. This isn't you. Whatever this is, whoever he is, this isn't you." But she just rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't start." Then the man stood up. He was taller than me, broader too. His movements were slow, deliberate, like he was waiting for me to make a move. "She doesn't want you," he said, taking a step toward me. "So why don't you be a good little husband and walk out that door?" I had never felt rage like that before. It was cold, crawling through my veins like poison. My fists tightened, my nails digging into my palms. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to do something, to hit him, to wipe that smug grin off his face. But then, he said something that made my blood run cold. "When your daughter grows up," he said, tilting his head, "I'll take her too." My breath stopped. My heart slammed against my ribs. Emily didn't react. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, arms crossed, silent. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't some affair that had spiraled out of control. She had chosen this. She had chosen him. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I felt my pulse pounding in my skull, my vision tunneling as my world caved in around me. I turned to Emily, waiting, begging, for her to react. To flinch, to get angry, to tell me she hadn't heard what this man had just said about our daughter. But she didn't. She just stood there, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. As if she had already made peace with it. My breathing turned ragged. "You're really okay with this?" My voice shook with disbelief. With him talking about Lily like that? She let out a breath, exasperated. "He didn't mean it like that," she muttered. The man, her lover, laughed, low and taunting. Sure. Don't get all worked up, Daddy." That was it. Something inside me snapped. I lunged at him before I even knew what I was doing. My fist connected with his jaw, the impact sending a satisfying jolt up my arm. He stumbled back, knocking over the coffee table with a crash. Emily screamed. "Are you crazy?" I didn't care. I wasn't thinking anymore. My body moved on pure instinct, driven by a fury deeper than anything I'd ever felt. The man pushed himself up from the floor, wiping blood from his split lip. He looked stunned for a moment, like he hadn't expected me to actually fight back. Then his expression darkened. Big mistake. He rushed me, slamming me against the wall so hard that the framed family photo above us crashed to the floor. I grappled with him, trying to throw him off, but he was stronger, heavier. His fist connected with my ribs, knocking the air out of me. Pain shot through my side, but I didn't go down. I wouldn't. Not in my house. I twisted, bringing my knee up hard into his stomach. He let out a strangled grunt, loosening his grip just enough for me to shove him away. He stumbled back, knocking over a lamp in the process. "Stop it!" Emily shrieked. "Both of you, stop!" I turned to her, breathing hard, my hands still clenched into fists. "This is what you want?" I spat. "You're really throwing everything away for him?" She didn't answer. She just looked at me, like I was the villain in this story. Like I was the one ruining everything. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't the woman I had married anymore. Whatever part of her had once loved me, once loved our family, was gone. A hollow, aching pain spread through my chest. I let out a shaky breath and turned toward the stairs. "I'm getting Lily," I muttered. Emily's eyes widened. "No, you're not." "She's my daughter too," I snapped. "And I'm not leaving her with you." I took the stairs two at a time, my heart hammering against my ribs. I pushed open Lily's door, my breath catching when I saw her tiny frame curled up in bed. She was still asleep, her stuffed bunny clutched in her arms. Peaceful. Unaware that her entire world was about to fall apart. I swallowed the lump in my throat and knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Baby," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Wake up." Lily stirred, her little nose scrunching up before her eyelids fluttered open. Her big brown eyes, so much like her mother's, but filled with innocence, blinked at me sleepily. "Daddy," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. I forced a smile. "Hey, sweetheart. We're gonna go, okay? Just you and me." She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. "Where's Mommy?" I clenched my jaw, trying to swallow the rage bubbling in my chest. "She's downstairs." I hesitated, then forced the words out. She wants to stay here." Lily frowned, confused. "But this is our home." I felt my heart crack. I wanted to tell her she was right. That everything was okay. That her world wasn't crumbling around her. But I couldn't. Not when that man was still downstairs. Not when Emily had already chosen him over us. I exhaled slowly and cupped her small face in my hands. "Do you trust me, baby?" She nodded without hesitation. "Then let's go." She climbed out of bed, still clutching her stuffed bunny. I grabbed her little backpack from the corner, stuffing it with pajamas, a few outfits, and her favorite book. It wasn't enough. It wasn't fair. But I wasn't leaving her here. As we stepped out of the bedroom, Emily's voice rang up the stairs. "You're not taking her, don't be ridiculous." I turned to see her at the bottom of the staircase, her arms crossed, her face twisted with frustration, as if I was being unreasonable. Behind her, he was smirking. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. "You really think I'm leaving my daughter in a house with him?" I shot back. Emily scoffed. "You're acting crazy. He's not a threat." I glanced at Lily, her tiny fingers curling around mine, pressing against my palm. "She's coming with me," I said, my voice cold and final. Emily's expression darkened. "If you walk out that door with her, I'll make sure you never see her again." My blood ran cold. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she wasn't bluffing. She would do it. She would fight me, drag me through court, lie, twist the truth, do whatever it took to take Lily away from me. And the worst part? She had the advantage. The courts favored mothers. If I didn't play this right, I could lose my daughter forever. I forced myself to take a breath. Think. If I ran now, I'd look reckless. Like an unstable father kidnapping his own child. That was exactly the kind of ammunition Emily needed to bury me. I had to be smarter. I exhaled sharply and loosened my grip on Lily's hand. "Fine," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "I'm not gonna fight you over this tonight." Emily raised an eyebrow, clearly suspicious of how easily I was backing down. "I'll sleep somewhere else," I continued. "But Lily stays in her bed." Emily hesitated, then sighed. "That's reasonable." I nodded. "I'll be back in the morning to talk about this." Her lips curled in satisfaction. She thought she had won. But I was already planning my next move. I knelt beside Lily and kissed her forehead. "I love you, sweetheart. I'll see you in the morning, okay?" She nodded slowly, but I could see the worry in her little face. I turned and walked past Emily without another word, stepping out into the cold night air. The second I got into my car, I pulled out my phone and made a call. "Hey, it's me," I said, my voice tight with rage. "I need a lawyer. Now." The night air was thick with tension as I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I could still hear his voice, mocking me. "When your daughter grows up, I'll take her too." I closed my eyes, breathing through the raw fury burning in my chest. I had never been a violent man. Never believed in revenge. But this wasn't about me anymore. This was about Lily. I had one chance to do this right, to make sure Emily never got the upper hand. My friend Greg, a divorce attorney, picked up on the third ring. "Tom. What's going on?" I swallowed hard. "Emily's cheating on me." A pause. "I'm sorry, man. I really am. That's not the worst of it." My voice was low, steady. "She wants me out of the house. And she's got some guy living there already." I stopped myself, bile rising in my throat. "He said something about Lily. Something I can't ignore." Greg's tone shifted immediately. "What did he say?" I clenched my jaw. "Enough that I don't trust him around my daughter. But Emily's on his side. She's letting him stay." Silence. Then, "All right. Listen carefully. You can't take Lily tonight. That'll work against you in court." I exhaled sharply. "I know. That's why I called." "You need proof," Greg said firmly. "If you go in guns blazing, it's your word against hers. And trust me, courts favor the mother, no matter how much of a monster she is." I leaned my head back against the headrest, my heart pounding. "How do I get proof?" Greg's voice was sharp. "You need documentation. Text messages, recordings, anything that shows she's unfit to have custody. And if that guy makes another comment like the one he did tonight, get it on tape." I nodded to myself. "I'll do whatever it takes." "Good. And one more thing." "What?" Greg hesitated. "Stay calm, Tom. I know you're angry. I would be too. But if you lose your temper, if you do something, Emily will use it against you." I closed my eyes. He was right. As much as I wanted to beat that guy into the ground, that wouldn't help Lily. "I hear you," I muttered. Good, Greg said. Tomorrow morning, we start playing smart. I hung up and stared at the house, my house. My daughter was in there. Sleeping under the same roof as him. It took everything in me to turn the key in the ignition and drive away. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The motel room was cold and impersonal, but I barely noticed. My mind was racing. Greg had been clear, I needed proof. I needed leverage. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, scrolling through old messages from Emily. The casual I love you texts had stopped months ago. The last real conversation we had was about Lily's school project. Everything else had been short, distant. And then, buried between mundane updates and ignored questions, I found it. A message from an unknown number, just 2 weeks ago. Can't wait to have you all to myself. It's time to cut him loose. Emily's response. Soon. I need him to go willingly. Can't risk a custody fight. My breath caught in my throat. She had planned this. This wasn't some whirlwind affair that got out of control. She had calculated every step, waiting for the right moment to shove me out, to make sure I didn't fight for Lily. I clenched my jaw, taking a screenshot and saving it to a private folder. That was just the beginning. I dug deeper, searching through shared bank statements. There, multiple cash withdrawals from our joint account, all within the past month. Large amounts. Where had that money gone? A sick feeling twisted in my gut. I needed more. I needed to see what was happening inside my house. That's when an idea struck me. Emily hadn't changed the smart security system. The one I installed. I opened the app, my hands shaking, and tapped into the indoor cameras. For a second, nothing loaded. Then, the living room came into view. And there they were. Emily, curled up against him on the couch, laughing at something on the TV. Her head rested on his shoulder, completely at ease. Completely comfortable with the man who had just threatened to take my daughter from me. I swallowed down the bile rising in my throat. Then he spoke, his voice clear as day. She'll come around eventually, he said lazily, stretching. The kid. She'll get used to me. Emily sighed. She's still asking about him. Him. Me. My fingers dug into the bedsheet. She'll forget soon enough, the man murmured, running a hand down Emily's arm. Besides, we've got bigger things to focus on. He leaned in, his voice dropping lower. You're already late. Emily hesitated. Then. I know, she muttered. Her hand drifted to her stomach. It's just. I didn't expect it to happen so fast. My blood turned to ice. I stared at the screen, my entire body locked in place. She was pregnant. Not with my child. With his. I felt something inside me break. This wasn't just betrayal. This was erasure. She wasn't just replacing me. She was rebuilding her life, without me, without Lily. And that man, that monster, was planning to take my place in every way possible. I took a shaky breath and hit record. I was done being blindsided. Emily thought she had won. But tomorrow, everything would change. Sleep never came. I spent the entire night staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every red flag I had ignored. By the time dawn broke, I had a plan. I called Greg the moment the clock hit 7 a.m. He answered groggily. This better be important. I have proof, I said, my voice cold. That woke him up. What kind of proof? I told him everything. The texts, the bank withdrawals, the security footage. The pregnancy. He cursed under his breath. That changes things. Damn right it does, I muttered. She's trying to push me out of Lily's life completely. There was a brief pause. Then, Greg's voice turned serious. "Listen carefully, Tom. We need to move fast. First, you're going to act like nothing's wrong. You don't confront her, you don't tip her off. Let her think she's winning." Every muscle in my body protested at the thought of pretending everything was normal. But I knew he was right. If Emily suspected I was building a case against her, she'd make sure to destroy any evidence I didn't already have. "What's next?" I asked. Greg's tone darkened. "We go legal. Today, you file for an emergency custody hearing." Emergency? My heart pounded. Is that even possible? "Yes," he said. "With the right evidence, a judge can grant you temporary custody today." My breath caught. Today. That meant I could take Lily out of that house. Away from him. What do I need to do? "I'll handle the paperwork. You just need to show up at the courthouse by noon." I nodded. "I'll be there." Greg hesitated. "Tom. I need to ask. Are you ready for this? Because once you do this, there's no going back. Emily will come at you with everything she's got." I thought of Lily. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine. Her innocent voice asking why Mommy wanted to stay. I clenched my jaw. "I don't care what Emily throws at me," I said. "I'm getting my daughter back." By noon, I was sitting outside the courtroom, gripping a folder of printed evidence so tightly my fingers ached. Greg appeared beside me, adjusting his tie. I talked to the judge's clerk. "He's reviewing your petition now. If he agrees there's immediate risk, he'll sign off on temporary custody. And if he doesn't?" Greg hesitated. "Then we go through standard court proceedings, which could take months." I exhaled sharply. "That's not an option." We were called in 10 minutes later. The judge was an older man with tired eyes, flipping through the paperwork as we stood before him. He glanced up. "Mr. Carter, you're claiming the mother is unfit. Do you have any evidence to support this?" I took a deep breath and handed over the folder. "Yes, Your Honor." He reviewed it in silence. The text messages. The bank withdrawals. The transcript of the security footage. Then, finally, he looked up. "And where is the child now?" "With her mother, in our home." My voice tightened. "But she's also living with the man my wife had an affair with." "A man who," I swallowed hard. "A man who made disturbing comments about my daughter's future." The judge's brow furrowed. "And you have proof of these comments?" "Yes." I pulled out my phone and played the recording. The words "when your daughter grows up, I'll take her too" echoed through the silent courtroom. Greg watched the judge's face closely. He didn't react immediately, but I saw it, the brief flicker of concern in his eyes. When the recording ended, the judge leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose. "This is troubling." He flipped to the last page of the file. Then, he picked up his pen and signed the order. "Temporary sole custody granted to Mr. Carter," he announced. "Effective immediately." My breath hitched. I had won. For the first time since this nightmare began, I was taking something back. Greg gripped my shoulder. "You did it." But I wasn't celebrating yet. I had one more thing to do. I was going to get my daughter. And I was going to make Emily watch as I walked out the door with her. I drove straight to the house, gripping the wheel so tightly my hands ached. The judge's words rang in my ears, "Temporary sole custody granted to Mr. Carter, effective immediately." For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. But I wasn't foolish enough to think Emily would let Lily go without a fight. As I pulled into the driveway, my heart pounded. The house looked exactly the same, but everything had changed. I wasn't just some man being thrown out of his own home anymore. I was the father of a little girl who deserved better. I stepped out of the car and strode toward the door. Before I could knock, it swung open. Emily stood there, arms crossed, eyes blazing. "What the hell are you doing here?" I held up the court order. "I'm here for Lily." She snatched the papers from my hand, her eyes scanning the document. Her face paled. You can't just take her. The court says otherwise." I pushed past her. She tried to grab my arm, but I shook her off, my patience long gone. "Lily," I called, my voice steady. "Come here, baby." A few seconds later, my daughter appeared at the top of the stairs, still in her pajamas, her stuffed bunny clutched tightly to her chest. Her sleepy eyes widened when she saw me. "Daddy?" I smiled, holding out my arms. "We're going, sweetheart. Just you and me." She didn't hesitate. She ran down the stairs and threw herself into my arms, burying her face in my neck. Emily took a step forward, her voice desperate now. "Tom, please. Let's talk about this." I pulled back just enough to look my daughter in the eyes. "Go get your backpack, baby," I whispered. "We're leaving." Lily nodded and ran off to her room. Emily's face twisted with panic. "You're making a mistake. The judge won't let this stand." I turned to her, my voice low and deadly. "I have proof of everything, Emily. The texts, the money transfers, the recordings of him talking about my daughter like she was some." I stopped myself, breathing through the rage. "You chose this, Emily. You chose him." Her mouth opened, then shut. For the first time, she had nothing to say. Then, like clockwork, he walked into the room. His smug grin was gone. He must have heard everything. His eyes flicked to Emily, as if waiting for her to do something. But she was frozen. So I turned to him instead. "If you ever come near my daughter again," I said quietly, "I will end you." He smirked. "You think a court order changes anything?" I smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. "No. But this does." I pulled my phone from my pocket and hit play. His own voice filled the room. "When your daughter grows up, I'll take her too." His smirk disappeared. Emily's eyes went wide with horror. "And me?" I just watched. Because now she understood. Now, she realized exactly what she had let into our home. Before either of them could recover, Lily came running back down the stairs, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Ready, Daddy," she chirped, gripping my hand. I squeezed her fingers and looked back at Emily one last time. "We're done." Then I turned, opened the door, and walked out of that house with my daughter. And I never looked back. Emily didn't go down without a fight. She tried everything, crying, threatening, playing the victim. She claimed I manipulated the system, that I was tearing our family apart. But the evidence spoke louder than her lies. Over the next few weeks, the custody battle became a war. Emily's lawyer tried to paint me as unstable, but Greg was ready. The judge reviewed the recordings, the financial records, the security footage. Every piece of evidence chipped away at the image of the devoted mother Emily pretended to be. Then came the final blow. A background check on him revealed a history. Assault. A restraining order from an ex-allegations, never proven, of something worse. The judge didn't hesitate. Emily lost custody. Supervised visits only. The moment the ruling was read, she collapsed into silent tears. She had nothing left to say. As I walked out of the courtroom that day, Lily's hand in mine, I finally felt it. Closure. Emily had destroyed our marriage, betrayed our family, and nearly cost me my daughter. But in the end, she lost everything. And I still had Lily. And that was all that mattered.